Good day. Welcome to another session on our Entrepreneurship Master Program. Today we're looking at the skills program managing stakeholders. We've looked at the theoretical component of it, meaning we've looked at how do you manage stakeholders. First, you have to identify the stakeholders. You have to determine or ascertain their requirements, and you develop an engagement plan, and you resolve any conflicts that may arise, and you continuously maintain that relationship. That's basically what stakeholder management is all about. And today we're looking at the case studies that we use in this program. We're looking at the Macdonald's, we're looking at Oakland A's, we're looking at AEY. These are the three case studies that we're using in this throughout the program. So each and every skills program, we look at these case studies to identify the relevant portions that are related to the topic that we're discussing. So we chose these three case study movies because they're based on reality, one, and two, they are different business models. So we'll be able to look at the three main business model, one which is the manufacturing and producing mainly from the Macdonald side, and then we look at retail or supply, which is the AEY, which is based on the movie War Dogs, and then on the solution side we have the Oakland A's, where we're looking at which is based on the baseball team, and the movie that is based on is Moneyball, and there is a book named Moneyball as well that you can read as reference, so that you'll be able to follow these case studies, because we only in this module we are only identifying how will they identify the stakeholders and how they will manage those stakeholders. So we're not going through the whole movie or the whole story like with the Macdonald's. We're not going through the whole story, Macdonald story, or the whole Oakland A's, how they manage projects, how they recruit players and all that. We're only going to look at, in this module, we're going to look at the stakeholder management portion. Even with AEY, we're not going to look at other things. We'll just look at how they build or how they manage their relationships with their stakeholders. All right, so we're going to start with, let's start with AEY for a change, because in other modules we always start with the Macdonald story. So for this one we'll start with AEY. Again, why starting with the AEY? Because yes, they had a lot of problems in how they managed their stakeholders, and that's what actually led them to be in trouble with the law. Eventually they got arrested, and Ephraim was sentenced to jail, and then David was under house arrest because they failed to manage the stakeholders or to deal with the stakeholders the way they're supposed to deal with them. Okay, so with AEY, we know that these guys were the tenderpreneurs, so they were running a tender business where they were tendering for defense contracts. So they were buying ammunition and weapons on behalf of the Pentagon, which is the US Defense Department. So with being in a tender business, it's quite involved. It involves a lot of stakeholders, right? Because generally the people who tender, they are not necessarily manufacturers. So I know manufacturers actually, they don't really tender. Most of manufacturers, they don't tender for government contracts because of, one is the involvement of the supply chain process. It's not like you do it once, so you have to do it for each and every order or each and every tender. You need to submit the tender documents and all that, which is time consuming. So most manufacturers, they build a relationship with tenderpreneurs. So who are the tenderpreneurs? The middleman between the manufacturer or the producer and the government. So there are middlemen who their job is to look for tenders. When they find tenders, they look for quotations Once they have their quotations, then they quote whatever they submit their tender. If they are successful, then they need to go and source the products or the goods that the government is looking for and deliver them wherever that they must deliver. It might be at government premises or at the beneficiary premises or wherever that the tender says they must go deliver. So AEY was playing that role of a middleman. So if you are in the middleman, you need to manage both sides. So on one side, you have a customer as your stakeholder. On the other side, you have the supplier as your stakeholder. But in the middle here, you need to manage the logistics. So you're going to have maybe a transport company, if you're not owning a transport company, as one of the stakeholders. You're going to have, okay, first, your manufacturer or producer becomes your key stakeholder. Your customer becomes your key stakeholder. You're going to have your project team, right, within your institution. And the main thing is that you need to get the product from the manufacturer or the producer to the customer. So that involves a logistic process. So the transport companies, then they'll become stakeholders. So now we're in the process of identifying stakeholders. So you need to be able to identify who are your stakeholders in business. Even if, okay, we'll look at the stakeholders when you're looking at the Macdonald case and then when you're looking at the Oakland A's. But in this case, we're just looking at the AEY case, how they identify their stakeholders. So one, the key, always your producer or your supplier and the customer. Then they become your first key stakeholders. So even your customer, most of the time, it could be like your project sponsor, because they are the ones who will be funding the project. But with AEY, the US department was the sponsor because they were the one who were ordering. They were ordering on behalf of the soldiers that were in the forefront, meaning in the ones that were in Iraq, as we saw from one of the contracts that AEY won, was to deliver guns in Iraq, and then others, they could be in Afghanistan or wherever that they've placed their soldiers. So in the AEY case, the main ones, let's say we look at, it was the soldiers in Iraq on the first contract, and then on the second contract, it was the soldiers in Afghanistan who were the main customers. So the sponsor, in this case, it was the American Defense Department, and the customers were people in Iraq or the soldiers in Iraq, and the other key stakeholder was the manufacturer or the producer or the supplier. Because on the Iraq contract, actually they were not buying the AK ammunitions from the manufacturers. They were buying it from the Albanian, because the Albanian, they were preparing for war, and that war, when the East and West were fighting, they were expecting war, but then the war didn't materialize. So the Albanian had a stockpile of bullets that AEY wanted to buy and sell to, or buy and deliver them to Afghanistan. So now, in that case, when you identify stakeholders, you look at your project to say, what do I want to achieve with this project? And then, in the process of me achieving this objective that I want to achieve on this project, who are the interested parties? So there might be different parties in the process. So it's not only for a project, remember, even for the business. You look at, okay, here's my business, it's a super deal maker. What do I want to achieve at the end of the day? Is to empower entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs become our key stakeholder. And then we look at the process to say, for us to empower these entrepreneurs, what do we need to do? Maybe we need to have accredited courses. Then the sitters becomes our stakeholder. We need facilitators to facilitate the trainings. Then the facilitators become our key stakeholder. We need the assessors to assess the portfolio of evidence of these learners. Then the assessors become the key stakeholder, but the learners must have a workplace where they're going to do their practical experience. Then the host employer becomes our stakeholder. You can see from the training perspective, I've identified about 5-6 stakeholders that we need to make sure that we manage. Without managing these people, the project might fail because they have a level of interest in it. And remember, these stakeholders are different, right? We need to manage them differently. So we need to implement different strategies for different stakeholders. So we won't treat maybe the sponsoring company the same as we'll treat the learner, because the learner, we need to train them. The sponsor is interested in the results, so we can update the sponsor regularly. That's how we're going to manage that. But for the learner, we need to make sure that we facilitate quality trainings to the learner. So the learner's interest is to learn. So how we manage that relationship, it will be different to how we manage the relationship with the person who's sponsoring that learnership, for argument's sake. And now the facilitator needs to facilitate the learning. And then as well as how we treat the facilitator will be different on how we treat the learner or we treat the sponsor, because the main thing, we need to make sure that we give the facilitator the necessary tools for them to be able to facilitate, and they report regularly. They give us update on the progress on the learners. And how we manage the seater will be different. The engagement will be different because they come for site visit or for moderation processes. You must be the nicest person that they have ever seen, so that they can approve your learners for certification. And with the learners, you might not be the friendliest, but you can be the most strict. So make sure that they follow the rules and the regulations of that training. Similarly, with the facilitator, you can manage them with a service level agreement between them and the institution. That's how you manage them. And even the meetings, maybe you might have more regular meetings with the learners or with the facilitator than with the learners. And with the CETA or the QCTO, you have maybe 1-2 meetings. There won't be regular meetings. And then you might have maybe few more meetings with the sponsor, because they will want to understand the progress. So how you manage your stakeholders is not, you can't paint them in the same brush. They're not the same, and you can't just treat them the same way. You need to make sure that each stakeholder, you treat them differently. So now, coming back to the AEY story. So AEY had the Pentagon to manage, right? And then they had the end user as well as the key stakeholder to manage, and they had the logistic part to get, and then they had the manufacturer or the producers or the suppliers to manage, and they had the logistic guys in between, depending on where they think they need to transport the thing from the airport, or from the factory to the airport, from the airport to the customer. That involves a lot of logistics management. So they need to make sure that they manage that logistic process. Okay, when it comes to logistics, you might not even have to meet the guys who will be doing the logistics, as long as you know you are using reputable people. So the management is probably maybe the initial engagement, maybe initial assessment, agree on the pricing and the terms. And if they are reputable logistic businesses, then your engagement will end there, active engagement. So what will remain is just maybe on the reporting. They need to inform you how far the things are. Okay, the main component on the logistics side for AEY is for them to secure reliable logistic companies. Remember, depending on the contract, like for the Afghanistan contract, they needed a tracking business. They needed a whatever. They used plane, and on the other side as well, the tracking business to collect from the airport to the customer. So this side, they need a tracking business to collect from the warehouse to the airport, and then the other side is to call, and then the airport, the plane to fly them to Afghanistan, and the Afghanistan side, the tracking company to collect from the airport to the customer. So in terms of logistics, if you are using reputable logistic companies, you wouldn't be under stress or requiring a lot of engagement or a lot of meetings, a lot of activities between you and the stakeholders, because that's what they do every day. One thing that they will do, probably the engagement, which will be giving you regular feedbacks in terms of where's the cargo, have they delivered on time, what time did they deliver, they send you the bills, whatever, to show that the delivery notes and all those things. So the engagement is limited when it comes to the logistic companies. And then with the customer, obviously the implementation plan or the tender would have indicated when the product's supposed to be delivered. So generally with the end user, the engagement might be if there are delays, where you communicate with the end user to inform them where the product is, if there are any challenges that you are facing and all that. So with the end user, there's not much engagement that is required, and you don't have to have regular meetings with them. You just need to have share the implementation schedule with them and continuously communicate when you're experiencing or you suspect that you might be experiencing challenges with the end user. But you must always have the end user in mind, because if the end user doesn't sign off on your implementation plan, then you have problems. As we've seen with the AEY's failure to deliver they didn't fail, but the end user was suspecting that they might not be able to deliver their guns on time. And he threatened them that he will cancel them for cause, meaning he will cancel them for failure to deliver. So Ephraim tried to manage the end user, but the end user was not interested. The end user just wanted his guns. If they didn't deliver, he was going to cancel them. So that relationship is very, very important. And you must build it. You mustn't only communicate with them when there are problems. You must build it up, share maybe the implementation schedule, and discuss their expectation, and just inform them, update them, so that you build a rapport with them. Once you have a rapport with them, then it will make it easier. Even if maybe you experience problems, they might be understanding, because you are managing them. You keep them in the loop, so that it's not a shock when you phone them to tell them you have challenges. But if you don't manage them accordingly, then when you're experiencing problems, they might cancel you. And if they cancel you, you might have already paid for the goods but not yet delivered, and they will be within their rights to cancel you if you violated the contract. That's why managing the customer as a stakeholder, it becomes critical. You need to make sure that you plan for it, you develop strategies on how you're going to manage that customer, so that if anything happens, your project doesn't fail. All right, but that's maybe on the tendering system. But even if you are not in the tender business, you need to make sure that you have a strategy of communicating with your customers. How are you going to engage with your customers to make sure that you keep your customers loyal to your business? That's the one stakeholder that you need to make sure that you look after. Because if your end customer or the end user is not happy with your product, then your business might fail, because you are in business to service the customer. So you need to have strategies in how you service the customer. Okay, and in the case of AEY, as I said, the end user was critical, but also the sponsor, the Department of Defense, the US Department of Defense, was very, very important, because they were the ones who were signing the check. The one who pays you is also critical when you are managing the stakeholders. So you must also have strategies on how you're going to manage them, because you need to manage them to make sure that you are on the same page, that you are meeting their expectations. And if you are experiencing any challenges, you should be able to inform them that, no, I'm experiencing these challenges. Maybe this is how I'm going to resolve them. And for AEY, the main challenges that comes through when it comes to stakeholders, there are two main challenges, and this also relates to stakeholder management. One, it was the manufacturer of the guns. Remember, when they were supplying the Iraqi soldiers with the guns from Italy, Italy suspended trade between Italy and Iraq. So they sanctioned any trade between Italy and Iraq. And then, but the shipment was in progress. So now, one stakeholder who is a supplier didn't inform Ephraim and them, the AEY guys, to say, we are suspending the shipment because you ordered guns from that you wanted to deliver in Iraq. So there was miscommunication there. So what could have happened that would have maybe reduced the risk is if AEY had an intentional strategy to communicate with the supplier, to say whatever information, build a good relationship so that if there are any changes, then the supplier will be able to notify them. If they had a good relationship, probably their dealer that side, or the person that they were dealing with the other side, might have told them to say, look, guys, be careful. We were imposing sanctions against Iraq, and you guys ordered the product from the guns to deliver in Iraq. But you need to see what you can do. But because there was no stakeholder relationship there, good relationship, then AEY was surprised. They were even called by the customer to tell them that, you guys, do you know there are sanctions? The Italians have just sanctioned any deals between Italy and Iraq. They didn't know. And this is because they didn't have proper stakeholder management strategies in place. Because if they did, they would have had close relationship with the Italians, the producers. And again, on stakeholder management, it comes on their Afghanistan deal, right? One, they were sold the Chinese ammunition. The bullets were Chinese. So the Albanian suppliers or the middlemen didn't tell them that we are showing this container, but the other containers have Chinese ammunition. So if they had, and then the Albanians knew that the Americans cannot buy the Chinese bullets. But because there was mistrust in the relationship, there was no good stakeholder management relationship between AEY and the Albanian guys. So they didn't get to know that the rest of the containers were the Chinese ammunition. That's one of the AEY's downfall. The second one is, after they've learned that the ammunition is from China, and China is sanctioned or is banned to do trade with the US, then they repackage the ammunition into the plastics, not branded. So the end user wouldn't have known where the source, the origin of the bullets the origin was. So, but Ephraim being Ephraim, he didn't pay the guy who was repackaging the bullets. And by not paying the guy who was repackaging the bullets, remember the guy just wanted 300,000. No, 100,000, $100,000 US. He was saving them about $3 million US by repackaging. So this guy, they should have kept him close and make sure that he's paid whatever that he's looking for. But unfortunately, because of poor stakeholder management, AEY didn't pay him. And this guy, it's 100,000. I mean, this is 100,000 out of a 300 million contract. So they didn't pay the guy that repackaged the ammo for 100,000. And in addition to that, it's just 100,000, but he saved them about $3 million. So they should have paid. I mean, you can't be having issues paying the guy who's saving your deal. Then they didn't pay the guy, and the guy is the one who reported them to the US Defense Department to say they've repackaged the ammunition, and eventually they got arrested. So you can see that stakeholder management is very, very important. It comes in different ways, but if you don't manage your stakeholders, that can lead to you failing. But in this case, I mean, it was pure crime. Not that I encourage that they should have gotten away with committing crime, but if they had paid the box guy, probably they would have completed that tender, and Ephraim wouldn't have been in prison. So this shows how important stakeholder management is. In one, making sure that you deliver your products in time, making sure that you meet your objectives, and making sure that they don't put your business at risk. I told you about the stakeholders of a training institution like ours. Different dynamics, how you manage those stakeholders. Now, you're looking at the AEY, different dynamics on how you manage the stakeholders. So you need to understand the type of stakeholders that you are dealing with, identify all the stakeholders and what are their requirements and how are you engaged with them. And if there's any conflict, you need to find a way to resolve it. Because AEY failed to resolve their conflict with the box guy. And the box guy ended up reporting them to the Department of Defense, and they got arrested. So now it's a simple thing of managing stakeholders. So just be careful, think long term, because stakeholders are your long term partners in your business. So make sure that you identify your stakeholders, you know what are their requirements, you develop an engagement plan or then the stakeholder management plan. Make sure that you have a communication plan, and if there are any conflicts, make sure that those conflicts are resolved amicably. So that's on the stakeholder management when you look at it from AEY perspective. Now let's look at the stakeholders, the Macdonald's case study. In terms of Macdonald's, who was Ray Kroc or Macdonald's stakeholders? Because the key stakeholders, like obviously is the customer, but I won't go into detail in terms of the engagement because I've already touched on it when I was doing the AEY stakeholder engagement. But in the Macdonald case, there are two key stakeholders that are very, very critical to the sustainability of their business model, right? One, the suppliers. Remember, McDonald's supply chain, it's one supply chain that supports all the restaurants. So they need to build a good relationship with the suppliers so that the suppliers can deliver the goods and services the way the McDonald's wants those goods and services. So they must do it the McDonald's way. I remember even with the bun, initially the suppliers were supplying half-cut bun, but Ray saw that this thing, it come half-cut, my people still have to fully cut it in half. It takes them time. So he engaged with the suppliers to say, look, just cut this thing in full so that when they come into the restaurant, there are two separate buns. And then I can just put them one on top of each other. My employees, they don't have to finish off cutting the bun in two. So from that, it saved the McDonald's system a lot of time. So it saved them time by not cutting the bun into two. That's simple. And it's because of stakeholder engagement. If there's anything that your suppliers can improve, you engage, you have proper relationship, you set up meetings with them, you regularly engage so that you are on the same page, right? And McDonald's do that Because the main thing that McDonald's is selling is the brand and its supply chain. Their supply chain is very, very efficient. But they are close to their suppliers. They work together even when they're developing new products. So they are so close to their stakeholders. That's what makes it different in the supply chain or in the system, McDonald's system. They know that they need to get their fries in this condition. They need to get their buns in this condition. They need to get their drinks in this condition. So that it makes it easier for McDonald's to deliver consistent service. So their suppliers are key in the McDonald's process. And then the other key stakeholders in the McDonald's system is the franchisees. Franchisees they become the agents of McDonald's, because in certain territories there is no McDonald's head office or McDonald's franchisor. They are relying on the franchisee to maintain the standard. Yes, they do the monitoring, but the person that is doing day-to-day interaction with the customers, who's providing the service, is the franchisor. So that's why they have proper training programs for the franchisors. They give them the system and they manage them to make sure that they deliver consistent quality, because the quality of McDonald's is reliant on the franchisees delivering the service the way they're supposed to. So that now they have store representatives, they go regularly, they meet, they engage, they have regular meetings with the franchisees to make sure that they're still in the same page, and if there are any challenges, McDonald's is there to assist them, the franchisees resolve these problems. That's why the system is sustainable. That's why the system is consistent. That's why the system is growing at the rate that it's growing. It's because of the relationship, one, between the franchisees and the franchisor, and two, the suppliers and the franchisor, because the McDonald's is a corporate, is the middleman in that instant. So, and then with their supply chain, they make sure that it's so efficient. The deliveries are done the way they're supposed to be delivered. Because remember, you're running a big system. They have regular meetings, but their supply chain, they use large institutions. So that you find that maybe an institution is focused on McDonald's logistics. They have a dedicated, if not a dedicated company, but a dedicated division that is just dealing with the logistics in relation to McDonald's. And even that, they have regular meetings, they have regular updates to make sure that any challenges are addressed as soon as possible. Because if they are not addressed, then the logistics system is not working, then the whole franchise model will collapse. Look, with McDonald's, they have less community issues because they're not dealing with communities. Yes, the franchisees in their communities, they will do their social responsibility, they will do their social engagement with the communities. But because McDonald's is small, it doesn't have a huge impact in communities. It's unlikely that the community will strike because there's a McDonald's opening or things like that. But if you are running a mine, it becomes a different story. Communities becomes your key stakeholders that you need to manage. Because you don't have hectic suppliers, because you are producing whatever the mineral from the ground. So your key stakeholders becomes the community. It becomes the government. But with McDonald's, it's not. The government is not a key stakeholder. They don't have to necessarily manage the government relationship. But as they are building, obviously, a local municipality will be a key stakeholder to make sure that he approves the plans, he provides the infrastructure that they need to provide. So it depends. Then the government side, it becomes more localized rather than at national level. But obviously, for McDonald's to be approved in a country, there are certain agreements that they need to enter into with that particular country. So, but that one is going to be managed at that level. So, but on the operation side, there's not much of government involvement. There's less of community involvement. So they're not worried about managing the community as such. Versus if it was a mine, the mine needs to make sure that they implement a proper stakeholder engagement plan, and they have make sure that they know what are the interests of the community, so that they can fulfill those interests. So I just chose the 3 key stakeholders that McDonald's, if the McDonald's system manages, and they need to make sure that they manage it so that they can supply that fast, consistent quality service. Is the franchisee, is the suppliers or the producers, is the logistic companies that are providing logistic services to McDonald's, to make sure that things are delivered on time, they delivered in right qualities and quantities, so that the system can work the way it's supposed to. Okay. And then I didn't touch on the customer side, because I've touched that on when we were talking about AEY, and I didn't touch as well much on the investor side, because these franchisees will have the banks that have funded them, then they become stakeholders. So your bank will always be a stakeholder. SARS will always be a stakeholder. If you have to comply with certain government regulation, that department becomes your stakeholder. So those are sort of your permanent stakeholders that you need to build a relationship. You don't have to be at SARS offices that often, but continuously engage with them so that you understand where they are, where are you doing the things the right way. And like your Department of Labor, if you have employees, it will also become your standard stakeholder. They're available, you need to consult with them on certain things to make sure that you are in compliance. So those are the stakeholders when it comes to a McDonald's case study. Now we're going to the Oakland A's case study. Now we're looking at the AEY stakeholder management. Who are the key stakeholders when you're looking at the baseball team? You have the players, you have the sponsors, you have the other teams, because you are playing with the other teams. And then you also have the supporters, the fans are your key stakeholders. Yes, you have others, the suppliers, the security and all those things. But the key ones are, 1, your supporters; 2, the other teams that you're playing with; 3, your players; 4, your sponsors. These are very key stakeholders that the Oakland A had to develop stakeholder engagement strategies around them. Right. So, but the fans, you just have to win your games and they're happy with you. And then maybe you can do certain things, maybe provide entertainment before and after the game, during the halftime. You can have performances there so that you keep your supporters happy. Because if they are happy, then they'll buy the tickets. They will make sure that they support your games. Because it's important to have the fans at the stadium, because you generate a lot of income from them. The other important one, as I said, the sponsors, the advertisers. If your customers or your fans are happy, they come to the stadium automatically, or not automatically, but your sponsors will be happy, because whatever they are sponsoring, there are many people who are coming to see their sponsorship and all that and promote their brands. Obviously, you need to engage with your sponsors regularly, share your strategies, the things that you are doing, to make sure that they are visible and they get the benefit from their sponsorship. So it's very, very important, regular engagement, making sure that you understand what are their goals, what they want to achieve by them sponsoring you. And then once you know what they want to achieve, then you develop a plan to make sure that they achieve what they want to achieve by sponsoring you. So that's the second stakeholder. The third one is the players. The players are key, but those are your very important assets that you need to make sure that you manage. Okay, so okay, I'll come to the players, how you manage the players, but maybe let's touch on the other teams. Remember, you need to build a good relationship with the other teams. You need to discuss the rules. You need to make sure that you attend the meetings where maybe the league is calling the stakeholders to attend. You need to make sure that you engage, because you trade players with them. So if you don't build a good relationship with the other teams, then they might not sell you players. They might not want to deal with you. No, they might be hostile to you when you visit their home ground. So managing the other teams that you are playing with in the same league is also very, very important. Regular meetings with them, engagement, sharing of news, sharing of new developments. That will improve your relationship with the other teams that you are playing with. And it will make your life easier, because if you have a good relationship, if you want to trade players, it makes it easier to pick up a call to phone the other team to say, no, hey, I have this player, are you interested? And it's evident in the movie that Billy Bean had a very, very good relationship with other managers, because when he wants to trade players, he just picks up the phone and phone the manager to say, hey, I have this player, are you interested? But he's not only doing that, he knows which managers to call, because he's got a good relationship. He studies the other teams to how they are performing, what are their weaknesses, who they might be interested in. That's one of the important things that you need to do when you're managing your stakeholders. Make sure that you understand your stakeholder so that you know their interest. So Billy understood the interest of his competitors, and when he's trading players, he knew which team to call, which team might be interested in which player. And then that made his life easy. He knew who to call if he wants to sell players, or if he wants to buy, who to call. And he can even make them bid against each other so that he get the best price. But now that comes down to understanding the stakeholders, the teams that he's competing with, because they are in the same association, they are playing the same game, and they trade players amongst themselves. So you need to build that relationship with your competitors if it's possible in your sector. Be closer to your industry association so that you keep informed, so that you have a relationship. If you build a good relationship in your sector, someone might have extra customers that you wouldn't be able to service. Will they call you to say, I have these customers I can't service because I don't have 1, 2, 3, 4? Because yes, I know you are competing, but you don't have to be in a Red Sea where it's dog-eat-dog environment. You can still build a professional environment where you can still share business, and you don't have to win so that others can fail. You can both win in the same environment if it's possible. But most industries, it is possible for a win-win between the competitors, because the market sometimes is just too big, you can't finish it. So if possible, make sure that you build that relationship with your competitors so that you can share ideas, you can share experiences that will contribute positively to your business. You must learn from Billy. He had a good relationship with other teams. You can pick up a phone to say, I have this player, will you be interested? And then, can I have this player? Because it's not important to you. Whatever the deal that you need to do. But it's because he built a very good relationship with the other teams. All right. And the last key stakeholder that we'll look at in terms of the Oakland A is the players. The players are the most important resource. They are the most important key stakeholder, because it is the players that needs to deliver. So how you manage them, you can use different strategies. But one of the things that I picked up from the movie is that Billy didn't build close relationship with the players so that it makes it easy for him to cut the players or to trade them, so that he's not emotionally invested. He can make an independent professional decision on the players, if he should trade the players or not. So how you manage them doesn't mean you have to be close to your employees or to the players, like Billy was not, because it made it easier for him to sell them. He didn't have emotionally invested, because sometimes if you're emotionally invested, you might not make the best decision for the company because you have close relationship with your employees. And please believe me, I'm not encouraging you to not be aloof when it comes to employees. There are certain environments where you can be closer to your employees and it will work better. But there are certain circumstances where you can't be too close to your employees, so that you will be able to make those tough decisions that needs to be made for the sustainability of the business. So in terms of Billy, how he managed his players, he kept the distance. But when it's necessary, he'll motivate them. He'll often go into the change room, discuss the tactics and where the game went wrong. There he built and motivate the players, but he didn't want to travel with the team, because there now you start meeting or engaging on a more social level, which might make it difficult for you to make decisions that needs to be made. So it is very important to make sure that even with the employees, I repeat, they are the most important asset that a business can have. They are key stakeholders in your business. Make sure that you keep them in the loop. Make sure that you are fair when it comes to treatment. Make sure that you treat them with care. You are transparent with them. You share there's limited information that you can share with them. You can't share with them everything, but they need to know what they need to know. You mustn't be hiding things that they're supposed to know. Then that will make sure that you have an open relationship with your team, most especially in the team. The players are the ones that are supposed to deliver. Employees are the ones that are delivering. Make sure that you look after your employees and you manage them the best way possible. And if you look at it from the Oakland A, when Billy wants to cut a player, he cuts the player. It doesn't matter. He's not emotionally invested, because he had to cut 2 players because the coach was not playing the system that he wanted to play. He liked the Pena, but he didn't want them to play on the first base. So, but the coach preferred Pena playing first base. So Billy, to make sure that he forces the coach to implement the strategy the way he wanted to implement it, then he fired or he traded Pena. That's how business is made, how you build a relationship, how he manages the coach. You make decisions that a business person is supposed to make without being invested emotionally. Yes, it's difficult to fire someone or to trade or to do that without emotions, but put the business first. Do what's best for the business. And maintain good relationship. Manage your stakeholders the best way you can. Because stakeholders are the ones that will sustain your business.